Okay, so I want to improve a little bit on how we get things from the API. So I want to create a simple service file that we're going to use, for example, in the properties, but we're also going to use them for the login, sign up, etc. This will make it much easier to set a global URL and similar. So let's begin by going to Visual Studio Code, and I can just close everything here, and then I find the front end folder, and inside the app folder I create a new folder called services. And then in here I create a new file called API service.ts for TypeScript. This is not going to include JSX or HTML, so we just have TS because we are not going to include any markup in this file. And then we begin by creating a function const API service equals like that, and then we can also just export it. So export default API service. So now this file can be imported into other files and use this function here. So we can begin by creating a get function that we're going to use to get things from the server. So get, this is then the name of the function. You could call it whatever you want. I want this to be an asynchronous function and function. And in here we want to pass in a URL, which should be a type of string. And we want this to be a promise, meaning that we are waiting for something to happen, like we get an answer from the server and similar before we continue and either resolve the data or reject it if there are any errors. And the promise can be any. Now we can just console.log get URL, just so that we can see that this is actually working. We can import this into page.tsx. Sorry, that's not correct. Into the property list. So inside property list. So we want to sort of move all of this code into here so that this file can be much simpler to read, and also the code is more reusable. So then inside here you can say import the API service, hit enter, then this will import. And I think if I go down here where we say get properties, let me just test this here. API service.get hello. So now this will use this function or class to call this method, which is this one, which right now will just print out something in the console. Let's see if it works. If I refresh, then you can see here get hello. Great, because we print get and then hello, which we passed in from here, which means that now it's working. But we need much more before this can actually be used. And the console can just be there, so it's easier to follow and see if there are any mistakes. But we can here say return new promise. So you can see here, this is what we put in to the function, and this is what we are expecting to get out of this function. So now we want to return the promise, and I will say resolve and reject. These are two possible outcomes of this. Create an arrow function like that. And then in here we want to use the fetch method. So fetch, then we pass in the backticks, and we say process.env.next public API host. We're going to set this soon, but right now you just have to know that this is the URL for the backend, which we're going to set in an environmental file. And then behind this curly brace, we pass in the URL that we got up there, URL. And then we can end the backtick like that. And then we want to set up what method we're going to use. So method, this is get, since we want to get stuff from this server. And then we can set up the headers, and this can here first be accept, and we're going to accept application/JSON. So this is what we want to get, and what content type, which is also application/JSON. Then we have the headers. The fetch is finished, or whatever you want to call it. And when it is finished, we say .then response arrow function response.json. So we just convert it to JSON and pass it along to the next. So .then we get JSON data here. Create an arrow function. Now we can say console.log response. So we know what we got from the server and what we want to print. Oops. Here is JSON. And then to pass this into the property list, for example, we can say resolve and just push in JSON. So now this promise here is resolved because it was working. But if there are an error, we can say .catch error function, and then instead of saying resolve, we say reject. So then we just push in the error into the property list. Save. So I guess this is not working as it should now. By the way, the backend is running, as you can see here, but I don't get any output right now. But if I refresh, it still says that, but now I get some errors because you can see the URL it's trying to use is localhost 3000, which is the one we are on now. That is because this is not defined yet, and we are also trying to using undefined hello, which is also incorrect. So let's try to fix this now. And to set up this, we can just create a new file, and this should go outside the app folder. So together with, for example, tsconfig and nextconfig, etc. So just right-click the Django BNB and say .env.local, because now we are in a local environment, and then Next will automatically find this file. So here we can say next public API host equals http://127.0.0.1.8,000, or we can say local host, which is the same. So let's save that now. Try to refresh, see if that works. No, it still uses the wrong URL. Let me just stop and start in case that is the problem. So ready, refresh. Okay, so what I did now was actually to just delete the local env.local file, create it again, write next public API host, the URL, then it just worked. So I'm not sure what happened there, but hopefully if you had the same error, it will work for you as well. Anyway, I now get a new error. It's failed on executing fetch on the window because the URL is not correct, and that is sort of correct because I'm just passing in hello as a URL. But if I say /hello and refresh, then you can see it going to the backend, and it's a 404 error, and that is more correct. So let's pass in API/properties instead, and then you can see that we actually get correct data from the backend. Nice. So then we can actually remove most of this and just use the API service instead. So let me just remove everything here, and we can say const URL equals /API/properties. Remember the slash at the end. And then I think I can say const tmp properties equals API service.get, pass in the URL from up here. If you don't want to specify a URL, you can just do it like this, so it's a little bit shorter. Let's put on this await so that we wait for this to finish. So we wait for this promise to either resolve or reject. And when that's done, we can say set properties and just pass in TMP properties like that. So hopefully, if I save now, go back and refresh. Okay, properties.map is not a function. Why? Maybe I should say .data. Yes, that's correct. So now we are using a API service to get the information about the properties and listing them. So that makes this page a little bit easier to read. Perfect. Then I can also remove this one so that we just use this use effect here, which will load only when the page is loaded. So everything is still working. Nice. So that means that now I can go to the to-do list here in Eraser and set this to done. Before I continue, I just want to say thanks to all of my patrons. If you too want to support me, you will find a link in the description below. Okay, so next step then is to implement authentication. Before I start working on the authentication itself, I want to just add one more method to this API service, which is a post functionality, because we're going to post the data when we log in the user. So here we can say post :async function. This is also a URL type of string, but here we also expect data, which can be any type, because we are going to make it possible to pass in form data as well as JSON. So let's just keep it at any for now. And we're going to return a promise of any type. Console.log post URL data, so we can see what we are returning to post and to what URL. Then let's just copy this and this down to there and say post method. We can copy the headers. That is correct, I think. But here I also want to pass in the body of this data so that we can get the post data in the back end. Okay, so close the fetch, and then we have the same as we do up here. So let's just copy this and paste it at the end there. So you just go through the JSON, print it to the screen so you know what has happened and similar. And save. No, I think I forgot to close something. Yes, as you can see here, I forgot to close this return correctly. There, so that is closed, but now this is not closed, but now it is closed. So let's just see that it is working. Yes, perfect. Okay, so have login, sign up and logout functionality. Let's try to replace this with sign up and login, because we want to make it possible to create a user before we can log in a user. So when we now click this one and sign up, we want to activate this and actually send data to the server. Okay, we have already created this modal, so let's find it here in Visual Studio Code. Open up sign up modal TSX. We need to do a lot of changes for this to work. So we already imported use state, but we also need a router because we want to make it possible to redirect when the user is when the account is created. So let's import this. Use a router, which is a hook from Next. So from Next/navigation, navigation, like that. You have the modal, you have the sign up, custom button. We might need to import more things, but let's keep it at this for now. Then at the top here we can initialize this router, so const router equals use router. So now we can use this, and we want to keep track of the email, the errors and the passwords using state. So here we can say const email set email equals use state, and this should be just an empty string. Const password 1 set password 1. This is also just an empty string. Let's copy this, replace with 2 and 2. And we also want an array of strings for the errors. So const errors set errors equals use state, and we can specify that this is a string array like that, and that we should initialize this with an empty array. Actually, we can put this at the end so it has a nice stair like that. And then I want to connect these fields here with these up here. And to do that, we can here after input say on change, capital C, so on change equals E for event. And when this event occurs, we say set email to e.target.value, which is the field we are in right now. So let's copy this for the other two fields. But here we want to say password 1, of course, and here set password 2. So I think that if we write something in here now, this will actually work. Great. I don't think there were before. We can also loop through the errors if there are any, and only show this if there actually are any errors. And to loop through them, we just say errors.map, so we map through them. We want to extract the error and the index, and this index is just the iteration index, so it goes from 0 to how many numbers of errors you have. Create an arrow function. And then in here we say return, create a new parentheses array. Close that one, that's closed, but we can close them down there. In here we can move this HTML. So you can see here now I get an error because I should have one more curly brace here, which should be stopped down there. So curly brace, parentheses, curly brace, which is this one. And instead of just showing the error like this, we can say error, which is just a simple string. But now we will also get a little error because each of these HTML fields inside, HTML tags inside a map like this needs to have a unique key. So here we can say key. Then we can do a little bit more advanced and say error underscore, pass in the index like that. So now this will, for example, have error underscore 0 if there are just one error. Save, and now you can see that we don't have any errors now. Perfect. But I think if I just add something there for testing, you can see how it will look like. Great. But we don't want that for default. When we submit this form, we can call an action called submit form. So action equals submit sign up like that. So now I get a warning because you cannot find this. But that's okay because we haven't created it yet. So below all of these variables, we can create the submit function. Submit functionality. And there we can just const submit sign up equals, this is an asynchronous function because we want to wait for the server and similar. Yes, then I want to create an array of data that we are going to pass in to the server. So const form data. So I call this form data even though we are not using the JavaScript form data element, but we are just calling it because I like to call it that. We want to pass in the email field. This is what we are expecting in the backend, and this is just pointing up to this, which again is connected to this one. We want to pass in the password 1, the password 2, and the password 2, like that. Now we can just say const response equals await API service, and when I hit enter now, it was automatically imported up there. Great. And we want to use the post functionality now, /API/auth/register. And I think that if I open up the backend code, this is something that we added there in the previous part. So user account. Okay, it looks like I'm wrong. We did not do that yet. We have just configured how everything of this are connected. Okay, so I need to set up the URLs before we can test this, but let's fix the front end first. Okay, so we are now posting to this address, and I get an error now because, okay, expected 2 arguments. We have not provided the data yet, but the data is what we have up here, form data. Nice. Now we can say console.log response. Actually, this is something we already print out in the API service, so we don't need to do that here. But we can say if response.access, we are expecting the response to have an access property. Then we know that everything is okay. Then we're going to call a function called handle login, which I will come back to soon. And we can say signup_modal.close. So now we close the window we are in and say router.push. So we redirect us to the front page. If you don't have the access, which is just short for access token, then we can say const tmp errors. We create a temporary array. String, because this is an array of strings, equals object.values. So we need to loop through all of the keys in the response that we have. Response.map error, and this can be any types of error. Create an arrow function and the curly braces. Now we just say return error. So now this should generate an array of errors based on what we get from the server. And now we can say set errors, tmp errors. So now we just set this array here, or this state, this state to the data that we get, and show it on the screen there. So I think that if I just try to submit this now, I will get an error, but not the one we are hoping for. Inspect, test, sign up modal. Why is this printing there? Okay, yes, I have not. So if I just go back here, find the submit button, this one, instead of calling it like this, just remove everything as I submit, sign up and save. So then we can try this. It will definitely not work, but at least we get some errors, because you can see here the data we are trying to post, but this is not found. Okay, so then we need to find it in the backend. So if you go back to the backend, just close the front end for now, find the user account, Then in here we can create a file called urls.py, because most of this already comes built in when we installed the authentication packages and similar from allauth and use as the simple JWT and similar. So let's just set up this URLs file and see if we can make it work. So if I go back to Visual Studio Code, I can begin by importing a few things that we need. So from, let me just close this, from dj rest auth.jwt underscore auth import get refresh view. This is something that we're going to use to refresh the token. And from dj rest auth.registration.views import register view. From dj rest auth.views import login view. We want log out view and user details view. And from Django, which is something I want to import at the top here, from django.urls import path. And we want one more thing from the REST framework to verify a token. So from REST underscore framework underscore simple JWT dot views import token verify view. Then we can set up the URL patterns, which is a list, begin with path, and pass in register slash. Now we're going to use the register view dot s underscore view. So we just reuse the view that comes from there. Set the name to be rest register. We can also set up the login and log out so that we have these path login slash login view dot as view name rest login. Copy this, paste, and say log out view and rest log out. I will come back to the tokens any minute, but we can keep it like this for now. Then we just need to find the main urls.py, which is in the Django BNB backend folder. And here we can say path API /auth, and all URLs beginning with API auth should go into include user account.urls. So in the front end we are trying to reach the URL called API auth register, and then API auth will match here, go into this one, match this one, and use this view to hopefully register and create a user. We can try this now by just hitting submit. Then I get a bad request expecting something is wrong. Let's open up the network. Usually easier to understand. Expecting value line 1 column 1. No, it did not make any sense. Expecting value line 1 column 1 char 1. What are we missing? So to refresh and test again so that everything is fresh at least. Still the same. It might be because if I go into models, we're actually expecting the name. I would think that this would give me a different error, but let's try to find here where we pass this in. The name Stein, just to provide a default name. Sign up again. No, still get the same error, so that's not the problem. Okay, so what is the actual problem? JSON parse. Sometimes it's just a very simple, stupid thing. API service. Let's try to remove the letters. Do this one more time. Okay, so that did something else. Unsupported media type is not what we want. Okay, so let me go back to Visual Studio Code. I think that this form here this form data needs to be stringified in order for the backend to understand this. So here where we pass this into the API service, we can say JSON with capital letters, stringify, and wrap this in curly braces, in parentheses, like that. So if we save now, let's try this one more time. Submit. Yes, that's better, because now we actually got a correct error message saying that my password was too short. Try one more time. The password is too common. Try a real password, and then I actually got a response with the access token back. Perfect. So if I now find the admin area, refresh, find email addresses here, you can actually see that this user is created. Nice. Which means that the sign up is sort of working now. But if you remember that somewhere here I did this, we need to handle the login, because we need to store this information in a cookie. And I'm going to use the server action for this, so it's not stored in the browser. So let's jump right into that. So I can close most of these things for now. I want to keep the sign up module up for now. But inside the app folder, let's create a new folder called lib. And in here, a new file called actions.ts. This needs to set the use server at the top, because we only want this to run on the server and not in the browser for security reasons. And then we can import cookies from Next. Import cookies from Next/headers. And just export async function handle login. So we want to have a function for handling the login here. And into this function we want to pass in a user ID, which is type of string. And we want the access token, which is also just a string, and the refresh token, which is also a string. Then we create a function out of this. And then we want to store each of these in separate cookies. It's very easy to set cookies here. So it's just a cookies function.set. And then I like to prepend things that's connected to the session or the authentication session with session_user ID. Then we pass in what we want to store here, and that is user ID, which we get from here, one of the parameters. And then we need to configure this let. So HTTP only, you can set this to true. And secure, and we only want to secure this if you are in production, so this is either true or false. And to check this, we can say process.env.node.env. So this automatically checks if this is set to production. And if it is, then this will be true. Now we can set how long we want the user to be logged in. So max age 60, with 60 multiply this with 24 and 7. So it's 60 seconds multiplied with 60 minutes, multiplied with 24 hours, multiplied by 7 days, which gives 1 week. So 1 week. And the path where this should be stored can just be /. And now we stop it like that. And then we can do the same thing for the access token. So how long, this is not how long you're logged in. This is just how long we store the user ID in the cookie. Then we have the access token. How long should this be active before we refresh this? Pass in the access token, and this should only last for 60 minutes. So 60 minutes before we need to refresh this from the server. And then copy this again, do the same thing for the refresh token. So if any user gets this cookie, it will only be valid for 60 minutes before it's not usable anymore. Then we need to set the refresh token, pass in refresh token, and this can also be for 1 week. So let's copy what we have up here like that. So I think that's everything I need there for now. We're going to expand on this because we're going to use this and create functions for getting these cookies very easy and similar. But here now we can actually implement this handle login functionality. So here we can say handle login. So now this was automatically imported. We imported handle login. It's important that you use these curly braces around this one. From applibs actions, alright. Then we say handle login. Then we pass in response.user.pk, which is the ID or the primary key. Response.access, which we get from the server, as you can see there, and response.refresh. And if I open up this here, you can see that we have the access, the refresh, and the user with the primary key, and also the email, which is something we get from the server. Now this should be stored. So let's try to create one more user just to see that this is working. Stein at hello.com. Then a password, submit. Okay, I was refreshed. So hopefully now this cookie should be stored somewhere and keep us logged in. Nice. So with that, I think we can say that we are now successfully making it possible for users to sign up. If you have any questions about this code, feel free to leave a comment below, and I will answer as soon as I can. I know that there is a lot to take in with the actions and the API service and similar right now, but hopefully when we keep using most of this again and again, it will stick better. So let's just go back here now and set this to done. Next, I want to tackle the login functionality. Okay, so a lot of the things that we did for the sign up, we need to now do for the login. But I want to redo that because it's important that you understand everything here. So let's find the components, modules, and login module. We have the module already, but we need to do some changes. I also want to have the router here. So import use router from Next/navigation like that. And we can import the API service. So import API service. And I think that's it. Now we need to import the handle login as well. So import handle login. And by the way, if you didn't understand it, when we created the user, we also logged him automatically in. But we want to use the same functionality here to create the login functionality. So basically we are logged in here. Now we just don't see it anyway, but we're going to get to that when we are finished with this login functionality. So here I also want a few states, but we can begin by setting up the router. So const router equals use router. And you can set up the state for the email. Const email set email equals use state, can be an empty string. Then we do the same thing for the password and set password. We don't have password 1 and password 2 since this is just the login. And then we have the error as well. So let me just copy this one and paste it below there. So that makes it easier to keep track of the errors. And if I scroll down, we can connect these to the states. So just like we did here, we have this on change. Paste it, email, paste it for the password, just replace this with set password. And then we can do the same thing with the errors. So let's copy this, remember everything, paste it like that, and we can activate this button here to be submit form. Wasn't that what we called it? Submit sign up. Okay, we can call this submit login. And the same for this form, should also have an action which should go to this one. So action equals, paste in submit login. So we get the warning now because this isn't created, but that's what we're going to do next. So const submit login equals async function, like that. And here we can begin by setting up a form data as well. So const form data equals, we want to send email to the backend, we want to send a password to the backend, like that. Then we set up a const response again equals await API service.post, and we want to post to /API/auth/login. If you remember that we imported it here, the login URL, which comes from DJ REST authentication framework. And we want to say json.stringify form data. And then we will get the response, and we can see if we have the access token and similar, just like we did here. So I think that I can copy this one, paste it, just replace this with the login modal because that's the one we want to close. And then we set the handle login and we return us to the front page. Else, then we want to print or add the errors to this list, and this is a little bit different than we did here. Here we can just say set errors, because here we actually get a list of errors. Response.nonfield errors, and save. So I think that is it. So let's try to open up this, try to log in with something that you know doesn't work. Unable to log in with provided credentials. Okay, Stein@hello.com. But that did work. Nice. So first it didn't work, then I tried again, it was then working. So now I'm essentially logged in. But it's impossible to know up here if you are logged in or not. But let's tackle that for the logout task. Now we can set this to done and jump right into logging out. And to create this, I want to create a functional component just for this logout button, which can talk to the backend. So inside this component folder, let's create one file called logout button.tsx, and make sure that this is a client component. I want to use the router here because when we are logged out, I want to redirect us back to the front page. So import use router, and as you can see here, you can see that we can import this from multiple places, but we want to use the next navigation, which is the correct one. And then we can import a function we haven't created yet, reset auth cookies, which we need to create soon, from /lib/actions, which is the file we created previously. And import menu link, which is the links that we are using for these two. We want to reuse that for this one. Then we can create this const logout button equals const logout button : react.fc for functional component, and create the arrow function like that. In here we can say const router equals use router, so this is initialized. And then I want to have a function for submitting the logout to the backend. So const submit logout equals async, create the arrow function, and just say reset auth cookies. So we call this function, which we are going to create soon, and then just router, router.push slash, so we are pushed to the front end. Sorry, the front page. Property push does not exist. Sorry, forgot the parentheses like that. Then we say return, so you can print HTML. We want the menu link. This have a label called logout, and on click function. And when you click this, we just want to call this one. I can just close menu link, and we can save now, which will not crash anything because we have just created a new file. But let's try to use this up in the user menu. So find user nav, scroll to the top and import logout button. You can see that this actually doesn't even work because there is error in here. So TypeScript doesn't let us use this path right yet. But I think I can say ... and then logout button. This should be printed down here somewhere, which I will come back to soon, but let's fix this so the error is gone. So let's find the file called actions.ts. Let's create one more server action. Export async, and then reset auth cookies, which is the name that we try to use here. Reset auth cookies. And this should not accept anything. So let's just keep this empty like that. And now you can say cookies.set, sorry, cookies with this function call, .set session user ID. And this can be set to empty. Sorry, forgot to say function there. Nice. So now we need to reset all of these 3 cookies. So if we just copy this, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste, then we can reset the cookies. The error there is gone. That means that this should now work. And then we just need to do a little change to the navigation, because now we want to only show this login button and sign up button if we are not logged in. So that means that we need to get the user ID. So how do we get this user ID? I don't want to get is declared, but its value is never read. Okay, I haven't shown it down here yet, but if I just say logout button, that error will move away. Has no default export. Sorry, export default logout button. I forgot to add that. No errors. And if I click here now, you can see the logout button. But when we are logged in, I don't want to show these two. So I need to do a little change in order for this to work. And the first thing is to create one more action here, because I want to make it possible or make it easy to get this user ID. And as you can see here, when we log out, we set this to be empty, which means that if you try to get it, we'll only get the empty result, which means that we know very easy that it is that you are logged out. So get data, because everything up here we are setting the data. So export async function called get user ID, and here we can just say const user ID equals cookies. Remember these dot get session user ID like that dot value. So this will crash if there are no value. That's why we're adding this here, because then it is sort of optional, and this will just return undefined or null. So now we can say return user ID. If it is there, then say user ID or null, like that. So now it's very secure and this will not crash. So I don't want to get the user ID here because I know that in the user navigation we're going to use them multiple places, and that's also the case for the nav bar. I know that we're going to use the user ID here multiple places, that's why I want to get the user ID here and instead just pass it in like a property. So here we can import this user ID functionality. Import get user ID, remember the curly braces, and at the top here I can say const user ID equals await get user ID. So now this need to set this to be an asynchronous function, and now this user ID will be available here and we can pass them in as properties to these components down here, which is what we are going to do. So here we can try to pass it in user ID equals user ID. Then we get the warning from TypeScript because it doesn't expect something, or doesn't expect anything actually. And then in the user navigation bar we want to set up this to accept getting these. So we need to create the interface for the properties. Interface user nav props curly braces, and here we want the user ID. Set this as a question mark in case you are not logged in, then this is just optional, string or null. So this can either be a string or it can be null. And then we need to make sure that this is a functional component from React. So colon react.fc, pass in the user nav properties, and inside this inside these parentheses we pass in user ID, which now makes it possible to use them down here. And this might seem a little bit overkill and complicated, but what this does is that now you can see here this error is gone, and then we know that since TypeScript will check that everything is allowed and secure and similar, then this code will not crash now because we only pass in what you are expected to pass in and similar. So then we just need to do the same thing for the logout button. So now that we have the user ID here, we can check down here if we have the user ID or not. So above this menu link here with the login and sign up, we say user ID question mark. If we have the user ID, then we don't want to show these two here, we only want to show the logout button. So let's paste that in there. Else, and we just say colon, add the parentheses again, fix the indentation, close the parentheses and close the curly brace from up there. You can see here we get the warning now. Let's see if it makes any sense. JSX expression must just have one parent element. Here we have 1, 2 element. So let's wrap these in a simple fragment like that and close. This could be a div if you wanted to, but I like these empty fragments because they are actually not generating any HTML. So if I save now, go back, click this one, we only see the logout button. If I click that, nothing happened. Attempted import does not. Let's refresh just to see. There are no errors connected to this one. Logout, nothing happens. Okay. Logout button, console.log, submit, blah, oops. Let's just see if we are actually clicking this. Yes. Reset auth cookies. Why is this not working as it should? I can close a little bit here just to make it easier. console log, refresh. Okay, so if I now click log out, we have this one which comes from logout button. This should be printed here because this is a server action. Session user ID, you can see that this is being reset. So why do we not experience, sorry, why is it showing up still here that the user ID exists? Console log, user ID, user ID. Let's see what this has sort of value. Refresh. Nothing there. And the value there is null. So why is this check here not working on the user nav? This one, why is this triggering true? Because the user ID should be null. Console log, STF user ID. Let's see what it says here. It says null. So if this not equals null, I don't think that should be necessary. Okay, what sort of weird stuff is this? If user ID, then we should be able to log out. But there is no user ID. Oops, that's not good because then there are more than one user ID. Baby. If you meant to render a collection of children. User ID. So what have I done wrong? I think I just forgot to add curly braces in there. Save this now. And now we have the login, sign up, log in again. So if I click up here now, we see the logout button and the login button is gone. Nice. So that means that if I go back here now, I set this to done and this to done, and now we have successfully implemented authentication to our project. And that was it for this time. If you have any questions about today's code, feel free to leave a comment below and I'll answer as soon as I can. See you in the next video.